Okay, today I'm going to introduce you to some poetic language, okay, and basically how to analyze poetry. This is not an easy subject to master. In fact, when I got to college, I was in a literature class. I had not had a very good poetry class before. I had had a poetry class, but we only analyzed meaning in poetry and we didn't analyze the structure of poetry. And so I got to the class and I was told I needed to analyze a poem, but I needed to analyze the structure. And then I also had to write a Shakespearean sonnet. And I had no idea how to do that. You have a question?
Yeah, I don't think I know what analyze means.
Okay, so analyze, that's a very good question. So analyze means that you read something and you decide what it means, how it's supposed to make you feel, what the author meant. Yeah.
You just think about it and try to figure it out.
Yeah. And when writers write things, they use something called rhetoric. They use rhetorical figures and they also use certain structures and types of writing. So you know about jokes, you know about short stories, right? You know about graphic novels and regular novels, right? So those are all different. They all have different structure. They're different types of writing and they all have a different structure. And you just kind of internalize that. You know, when you read it, you're like, oh yeah, I know what a novel looks like and what a graphic novel looks like. And I know the difference, right? Well, with poetry, a lot of people have a hard time internalizing the structure of poetry, maybe because we don't use it as much in our society, at least not as structured as it used to be. We do use poetry a lot in music, but it's not nearly as structured as it has been in the past. So, in Shakespeare's time, they were very structured with their poetry, and Shakespeare actually developed a kind of poem called a Shakespearean sonnet. He changed the way a sonnet was written and wrote many, many sonnets in his own format that then became known as a Shakespearean sonnet because he wrote so many of them. So there are multiple terms we're going to learn today. And in order to help you learn those terms, I've given you lots of different ways of remembering them. I need my tape. Would you mind getting that for me?
Blue tape?
I think it's just in the schoolroom.
In here?
Uh-huh. On the floor, I think. If not, it's downstairs on the table.
Okay.
So, I'm giving you multiple ways to remember every single thing because there are so many new terms. There's going to be 9 new terms at least that you're going to learn today. And they all have to do with how poetry, the structure of poetry, how poetry is made. So, you choose which device I give you that makes sense to you. Some of them will be visual, some of them will be more, I don't know, they'll connect to things you may know already. Some will be audible, meaning that when you hear them, you're like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. So if you have any questions as I lecture, go ahead and ask me. You're already doing really good at that. For my scholars, I want you to take notes. It's really important because in the end, we're going to be playing a very competitive game. And there will be candy prizes. So you want to win. So some of this will be reviewed to my scholars, but most of it's new. Okay, so we have talked about iambic pentameter. This is the form Shakespeare used to write poetry within his plays and his own poems. So when you learned about iambic pentameter, you learned about a foot of poetry. And just to remember what that means, poetic feet are different combinations of stressed and unstressed syllables that together make up a unit of a line of verse or poetry. So what that means is if you say alligator, alligator, one of those syllables is stressed. It's stronger than the other. So there's lots of different ways you can say alligator. You can say alligator, 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 alligator. But which one's the right way? Yeah, you're putting emphasis on a different syllable.
Alligator.
Which syllable do we put the emphasis on in alligator?
Probably the owl.
The very first one. So a poetic foot is just that unit, however many syllables, it can be different amounts of syllables, that helps us know where the emphasis is. And in poetry, they continually put the same emphasis on the same syllables. This door might be too cold for me to do that because it snowed today. Okay.
No, it sticks less when it's cold.
Yeah, isn't that funny? There must be a scientific principle behind that. Okay,
A pattern of stressed and unstressed that you can repeat.
a pattern of stressed and unstressed that's repeated throughout the line. And then meter in poetry is the rhythm you hear from those stressed, unstressed syllables. Okay, so this is my meter stick, right? So in every line of poetry would have the same meter in one poem. So you would have 2 feet of certain type of feet in the line. And if there were 2 of them, that would be dimeter. So di means 2. You have 2 feet in that meter. Or you can have 3. That's trimeter. 4, that's tetrameter. 5, pentameter. And 6, hexameter. Okay, so different amounts. So those are pretty easy to remember. I'm going to write them on a board for my scholar, but it's a lot like geometry, right? So all the shapes in geometry, they start with a certain prefix. We have a triangle and we have trimeter. We have
Tri means 3 because a triangle has 3 sides.
Or a pentagon with 5 sides, and we have pentameter, which is pentameter. But we put the stress syllable in a different place than you would expect. The only one that's really different is tetrameter, which is 4 feet in a line.
Tetra means 4.
Yeah, but maybe in some geometry, but we don't really we say quad for 4 in
what would
geometry.
Like a square wouldn't be a tetra whatever.
Yeah, we call it a quadrilateral, right? So now that you know the different types of meter, which is just depends on how many feet of are in that certain line of poetry. Now I'm going to explain to you the different types of feet. Okay? So feet, remember, are a pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. So it can be stressed, unstressed, or unstressed, stressed. So in those cases it would be stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed. And then unstressed, stressed would be go unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, right? And there can also be more syllables in one foot than just 2. You can have unstressed, unstressed, stressed, or stressed, unstressed, unstressed. Okay, so each of these different types of feet have a name. The first one is called an iamb, and my scholars have already learned about iambic pentameters, so they already know that an iamb is unstressed, stressed. And so actually, if you say the word iamb, it is unstressed, stressed. Well, no, that one's stressed, unstressed. But if you say it in this line of poetry that I'm going to help you remember it, then it is unstressed, stressed. So this is a god, okay? The God of Israel, right? You know he's the God of Israel because he has that halo thing that all the Renaissance artists did with the God of Israel and all other saints. They put a little halo over Christ's head. Yeah, that like golden ring around their heads. So this is I am. That's God's name, right? I am. One of his names. So our line of poetry to help us remember that an I am is unstressed stressed is I am that God I am. I am that God I am. And it's also really helpful to know that each of the main types of feet were associated with a element. So air was an I am, and God is above us in the air, right? So I am that God I am. Has 2 syllables, stressed, unstressed. It sounds like da-dum, 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 da-dum. That first syllable is unstressed. I. And then that second one is stressed. Am. I am that God I am. Okay. My low battery sign is up. Would you mind fixing that for me? So there is I am. It's up high in the air to help us remember. And Shakespeare wrote in I ams a lot. Okay. The second type of foot that we're going to learn about today is a trochee. Okay. Trochee to me sounds like try, which means 3. So to help you remember that, our key here has 3 loopy loops at the top, fancy loopy loops, and 3 teeth at the bottom. So it is a trochee, almost like tri-key, but trochee, okay? And the way we're going to remember this, my scholars will think this is really funny because a lot of them really like the Marvel Universe, is Mr. Low-key, I have no key, okay? Because a trochee puts the stress on the first syllable of 2 syllables. So, Mr. Low-key, I have no key. Loki is a character from the Marvel Universe. Mr. Low-key, I have no key.
Are you going to fix that notification yet?
No, he hasn't. He's working on it. I actually realized I am going to need something to write on to demonstrate something. Oh, I guess I can use this. Okay, so those are the first 2 very, very common types of feet. Dr. Seuss used trochaic meter a lot. So that Mr. Loki, I have no key sounds a lot like Dr. Seuss, right?
Lexi, stop it.
Okay, then we have our third type of meter. This one has 3 syllables, and it goes unstressed, unstressed, stressed. Da-da-dum, 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 da-da-dum. To me, that sounds like a ship sailing. Ships were notorious for having rats carrying disease from one land to another. Also, the name of this is anapest. Anapest. That is the name of this type of foot. And rats are pests. So, this is our way of remembering anapest. Pests are very destructive, so is fire. This anapest element is fire. Anapest. Oh, I forgot to tell you that trochee's element is earth. Loki wanted to control the earth, I think. So.
He did try to take over the world.
Yeah, so there you go. That's how you're going to remember. Mr. Loki, I have no key. Anapest is I'm a mouse in a house. I'm a mouse in a house. Okay, so unstressed, unstressed, stressed. Da-da-dum, 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 da-da-dum. Anapest, anapest. Okay, I'm a mouse in a house. This is this type of foot that is often used in what are called limericks. Okay, our last one that we're going to really focus on, our most common feet in poetry, is called a dactyl. So that to me sounds like a pterodactyl, right? Dactyls are made up of 3 syllables: stressed, unstressed, unstressed. Stressed, unstressed, unstressed.
That's the opposite of the
Anapest, right? The opposite of anapest. So actually, I am and trochee are opposite of each other, and anapest and dactyl are opposite of each other. If that helps you remember. So this one's element is water. You can imagine the dactyl swooping in to scoop a fish up out of the water or something like that. Dum da da dum da da dum da da dum da da. Stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed. Okay, that's what it sounds like. Our mnemonic line of poetry to help us remember this is: dactyls are dinosaurs dancing the night away. Dactyls are dinosaurs dancing the night away. Okay. This kind of meter, dactylic meter, is most commonly used in music. And we still use that a lot today. In fact, that sound, da 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 dum da da dum da da dum da da, probably reminds you of the waltz, which is a dance where you step 2 3, step 2 3, right? So,
Mom, this is kind of absolutely nothing to do with lesson, but pterodactyls aren't actually dinosaurs.
oh no, I did not know that. My very smart 8-year-old knew that pterodactyls aren't actually dinosaurs. Okay.
They're considered as.
Also important to know is that there are 2 other kinds of feet, but they're very rare. In fact, I couldn't even think of examples of them, and they're called spondaic meter. That has 2 syllables, and they're both stressed. Dum, 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 dum. I can't think of even a word that has 2 stressed syllables. So I'm imagining this is very, very rare. And the opposite of it is pyrrhic meter. And pyrrhic meter also has 2 feet. And guess what? They're both unstressed. Right. Da, 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 da.
I don't think I can think of anything.
Now, when you are looking at poetry, and analyzing poetry, we do something that we call scansion. And scansion is how we determine whether or not syllables are stressed or unstressed. So I'm going to use our dactyls are dinosaurs dancing the night away. Dactyls are dinosaurs, dancing the night away.
The camera thinks that picture of Jesus is
a face.
Like a face.
Is it trying to focus on it?
Yeah, it was trying to.
That's awesome.
For a second.
That's awesome. So stressed syllables are written as a forward slash. So like that, above the line of poetry. And unstressed syllables are written as a little u. Dactyls, 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 okay? And anytime you finish a foot of poetry, you're gonna put a line between all the feet, but we're gonna wait. So when you look at the word dinosaurs, which syllable has the stress on that? Is it dinosaurs, or is it dinosaurs, or is it dinosaurs? How do we say it? Dinosaur. So that would be the stressed syllable. And then these 2 would be unstressed, unstressed. Dinosaurs. So then that helps us. Dactyls are, we know that one's going to be unstressed too. Dactyls are dinosaurs. How about dancing? Dancing or dancing. How do we say it?
The first one. Dance.
Dancing. Okay, and how about away? Oh, those are both unstressed. Okay, so that helps us. Now we know we've got this one here, stressed, unstressed. This one here, stressed, unstressed. This one's stressed, unstressed. And oh, look, this word is usually unstressed. So that really helps us to separate this out into feet. And once we've separated it out into feet, we can count them. So we know, okay, this has stressed, unstressed, unstressed. Which type of foot was that? Stressed, unstressed, unstressed. Dum da da. Do you remember?
That was dactyls.
Dactyls. Oh, look at that. It gives it away. So this is dactylic meter. And how many feet does it have in it? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. Do you remember what kind of meter was?
Quadrillimeter?
Well, remember we don't use quad. We used a different one. Do you remember?
No.
Tetrameter. So this is dactylic tetrameter. Okay, dactylic tetrameter. And that's how we figure it out. We write out a line of poetry. We scan it, or you're doing scansion on a line of poetry. So that's how you figure out what type of foot am I seeing and how many of them are, and then you say the type of foot and how many of them you see with the word meter. Okay, so this is dactylic tetrameter. Okay, so now that you've got foot and meter figured out, so now you can count all the different feet in a line of poetry, and you know how many feet are in it, and that's the meter. Now you've got lines to worry about, because poetry is written in lines, right? And it's got like a paragraph almost, and then another paragraph, but there's different size paragraphs. Well, guess what? All of those have names, and they're very easy to remember, and this is how we're going to remember them. 2 lines of poetry is a couplet, like a couple in love. It's 2 lines of verse with the same meter.
A lot to do with Shakespeare.
He wrote a lot about couples. And they're usually rhyming, and they just come one right after the other. And then there could be a space after them. Space before, space after. That makes it a couplet. She's okay. She's okay. Okay, so we have a couplet. Then, oh my goodness. Have you ever heard the expression 3's a crowd? Do you know what it means? It means when you're on a date, you usually want to be just guy and girl. But sometimes you have an awkward love triangle where 2 girls are in love with the same guy, or 2 guys are in love with the same girl. And it can make people feel rather
Romeo and Juliet.
and it can make people feel rather terse or frustrated. So 3 lines of verse makes people feel terse. And that would mean it's called a tercet. So we have couplets and tercets. And boy, is it not fun to be in a tercet. And then we have 4 lines of poetry. This is called a like quad, train, quatrain. Okay, so here we are on the quatrain. You can imagine it has 4 cars. This took me long enough to cut out. I was going to add 4 cars. But there are 4 different what's called rhyme schemes that you can use with a quatrain. So couplets, they usually both rhyme. So that would be what we call the rhyme scheme AA, meaning this line A rhymes with this line A. But in a quatrain, you can have line A and then line B that doesn't rhyme with line A, and then another line A that rhymes, these 2 rhyme, and another line B.
I like
A, B, A, B.
But if they have more than 2 lines between each rhyming one, it kind of gets me confused.
Right, yeah.
Especially when singing songs.
Yeah, it can be kind of a confusing rhyme scheme if you separate it out too much. So there are actually 4 types of rhyme schemes that you can use in a quatrain. There's A, that means all the lines rhyme together. There's A, B, B, so the first 2 lines rhyme and the second 2 lines rhyme. There's A, B, so the first and third lines rhyme.
I bet I can guess
And the second and
one.
fourth. And?
A, B, A, C.
Nope, not C. Because it has to have something to rhyme with. So you can only use A and B because when in 4, you've got to have something to rhyme with. But that was a really good guess. So I said A and A, right?
ABAA.
And A, and A. So you can have the first and fourth rhyme and the second and third. I know. Lots of different interesting ways of doing things. So we have a quatrain. And last but not least, this is not a single stanza, but this is a combination of stanzas made famous by the poet Geoffrey Chaucer, the English poet Geoffrey Chaucer. He's a funny guy.
His name's funny too.
Isn't it? And let's see. That is called a rhyme royale. And it has 7 lines. So we have 7 jewels here for 7 lines. Okay. And those 7 lines can be composed of a quatrain and a tercet. So that would be like having this awkward three's a crowd couple riding on the train and making everyone else miserable. That's one rhyme royale. Or you can have a really awkward group date, which is 2 couples, 2 couplets, and a tercet. So I've also represented that here. We can have 2 couples and a tercet, or we can have a quatrain with a tercet riding on it. Make sense? So those are the different rhyme schemes, or no, these are the different combinations that make up a rhyme royale. But the interesting thing is that a rhyme royale is always written in iambic pentameter. So always unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed 5 times. 5 feet in the line. And it always has a particular rhyme scheme, which is A, B, A, B, B, C, C. A, B, A, B, B, C, C. Yeah, that's iambic pentameter. And then it has that particular rhyme scheme as well. So those are the really fun poetic structures that we want to teach you about today. And the reason being is because they are often present in Shakespeare, and understanding them will help you know how to say Shakespeare when you are reciting it out loud, what syllables to emphasize. And one really interesting thing is that the syllables that are emphasized can often be the most important parts of the line or parts of a word. And so when you read just the stressed syllables, you get like the most important message out of the poetry, out of the lines. So when I have all my scholars, after we've done all this, we're going to separate into 2 groups, the Montagues and the Capulets, and we're going to fight to the death. Everyone will have 90 seconds to answer. Once they pick a question, they'll have 90 seconds, their team, to answer a question. And the person who chose, if they get it right, and of course they can ask their team for help, will get a treat associated with that number. The easiest questions, level 100 questions, are worth 5 candy corn. The 200 level questions are worth 10 candy corn. The 300 worth 15 candy corn. The 400 worth 1 candy bar, fun size. And the 500 worth 2 fun size candy bars. So we're going to have a really fun time. We'll keep score for the Montagues and Capulets. In the end, we'll throw a party for whoever wins. It's going to be great. So that's my lecture for today. How long did I go?
Just a second.